In this 65th episode of the Misaal podcast, you will listen to my conversation with Huzaifa Ahmad, the co-founder of RIZQ, a social impact startup that's tackling the problem of food insecurity and waste through its many different programs. Let's listen in. Welcome to the Misaal podcast, Huzaifa. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, Zahid, thank you for having me. I'm good.
Excellent. Well, this is my first time talking to someone who is running a nonprofit. Let's get started with a quick introduction, and please tell me the backstory behind RIZQ and how did you, come about, starting this nonprofit?
My name is Huzaifa Ahmad and I am one of the founders of RISK. So along with me, I have two other founders as well, Musa and Qasim. How the story goes is back in 2015, when we were studying in LUMS, we had this idea doing something around food that is when we actually started back in 2015 April. My mother had been conducting a dastarkhan, जिसको दस्तरखान कहते हैं, soup kitchen कहते हैं, लंगर कहते हैं. People coming in every day at our house. She cooks the meal herself, and this is 200, 250, 300 people having at my backyard every day, sitting there, just like a dastarkhan, just like a place where they can have food. We always thought that there are so many people who are left behind, and there's only so much she can do at the end of the day. On the other side, while we were studying, we had this realization that there's a lot of food that is going around being wasted. So we always used to go dine out. We always used to think what happens to the food that is thrown away, that is thrown away, left over at weddings or restaurants or our cafes at LUMS. So we just started to think about what we can do while studying here in LUMS. We have some limited time, what we can do. So we ended up making a Facebook page one day, just out of boredom. We thought we should be doing something, and we thought that Facebook page is going to be the right idea, and we gave it the name RISK, and we put up a status that if you have any excess food left over, just give us a call. We gave our numbers, all three of us, and we decided whoever is free among our classes would eventually go on his car and pick up the food, and we know where to give food because that is what my mom has been doing. She's been making food. People have been coming. We know there are a lot of people that still are waiting, or we know places where people come from. So we'd eventually distribute that food. So that is how the very small idea of channelizing food, the food that is wasted, the RISK came into being. And cutting it short in a nutshell, when we jumped into the whole idea, when we saw it ourselves, the magnitude of the problem, not just the food that was being wasted, but as we delve into the whole scheme of things, we realize the poverty pockets around our own areas, how people have to struggle just for food, right? So it eventually made us question that what we need to do. How do we address this larger problem that we have in hand? It's not just the food waste at the end of the day. It's the poverty, it's the food hunger, it's the food injustice that we eventually, if found the right word, that needs to be figured out in this country. And then we started developing different scheme of programs, projects, ideas, technology that could help solve the problem for us. And the problem for us was not just feeding people every day. It was always about building the capacity, the infrastructure that could address this problem as a whole. And when we are looking at the problem from a zoom out lens, we are looking at a larger scheme of things. We always thought what could be the solution to the problem.
When you are at LUMS, around you, people are not really graduating and starting a nonprofit, right? People are, getting jobs, starting, businesses, but it's not a nonprofit. You probably were one of the very few people who are doing this. So were there any reservations that you had that, okay, we are venturing on to something that, we might not end up, succeeding in? Were there any concerns about what you were doing from, maybe within your team or, people from outside too?
Yeah, to be honest, while I still vividly remember, when we were graduating, there was this sense of doubt among all three of us, because in 2015 we started off, and up till our time of graduation, it was a volunteer thing, but it was pacing up. We were really active in what we were doing at RISK. We started making volunteer groups among LUMS. We started mobilizing other university chapters, because we thought there is a lot of food that is going waste, not in Lahore, in other places as well. So we might need more volunteers who can just voluntarily go to different places where because we were getting queries, right? So हमें call आ जाती थी किसी के वक्त हम क्लास में कि मेरे घर से आई स्टिल रिमेंबर जो पहला पिकअप था वो लाहौर के अंदर जेल रोड के इलाके से एक घर से पिकअप आया था उनकी रात को दावत हुई थी उसका लेफ्ट ओवर तो द लेडी कॉल्ड शी सेड कैन यू कम एंड पिक आई हैव अ लॉट ऑफ हलीम दैट इज लेफ्ट ओवर और मैं नान मंगवा रही हूँ और आप आए इसको मैं पैक कर रही हूँ कैन यू गाइस टेक अप दिस फूड एंड लाइक डिस्ट्रीब्यूट इट so this was my first call and we were sitting in our cafeteria at LUMS. और इस तरह पे कोई जाना शुरू होगी और हमने कहा कि इसको we need to pace it up. हम अपने तौर पर voluntarily pace up करते जा रहे थे and then came the graduation time, which was really doubtful कि अभी तक हम जो चीज़ voluntarily कर रहे हैं. So one thing उस time period में we got connected to really good mentors, I would say, who actually started giving us the perspective that was, I think, needed. उस वक्त शायद पैसे की या फंडिंग की या किसी और चीज की उस वक्त इतनी जरूरत नहीं थी आई रियलाइज के बट व्हाइल वी वर यंग वी नीडेड दैट पर्सपेक्टिव व्हाई डू वी नीड टू डू दिस सो एक आपकी स्कूल लाइफ में एक हद तक तो आपको वो होता है कि आपने अच्छा काम किया और जब तक खाली टाइम था तब तक किया बट जब आपको एक पर्सपेक्टिव मिल जाता है तो आई वुड से you can't be ignored for the rest of your life. Once you know something, there's always this regret. अगर आपको कोई चीज नजर आ जाए, you're not unable to do this, you'll always carry that regret in your heart. यार मुझे इस वक्त वो चीज पता थी at that particular point in time, but मैं वो कर नहीं सका. And you will always go back in your life कि अगर मुझे वो मौका मिले तो मैं वो चीज थोड़ी सी इस तरह करता क्योंकि मुझे वो चीज पता थी. By the 2015 से लेकर 2017 तक we had got such good perspective of why this was needed to be done in Pakistan. के by the time of graduation we thought हमें कुछ एक partners भी ऐसे मिले who gave us this liberty कि we will give you some ecosystem support. You give your first 6 months and try to figure out if you guys can make up something. So we got some partners while we were graduating. वो रमजान का टाइम था summer के रमजान उस वक्त आ रहा था. We used to conduct Dastarkhans and all of those. We got a really good partner. उसने हमें कुछ पैसे भी दिए, very small amount although, but we three thought कि हम इसको एक chance देते हैं. So why not? So like let's give 6 months into graduation after to this whole idea that we really believe. और फिर develop करते if something comes about, we will see. So that is how we jumped in. But I still know okay, it was very doubtful among three of us. We had a lot of fear of what is yet to come because बहुत ज़्यादा peer pressure होता है बहुत लोग बहुत जगह अप्लाई कर रहे होते हैं the corporate culture is coming in लोग corporate jobs में जा रहे होते हैं people who come from their own family businesses are joining in a lot of people are going to very good universities for masters so there's a lot of pressure building up in your last 3 months at your university it can be any university not just LUMS it is the same everywhere so but what I would give credit is to the mentors that we found at that particular point in time who saw the sincerity, who very sincerely gave us really good advice as what the perspective on life is, what is the problem that we are trying to solve, and how big of a problem it is, and how small your problems can be. But if you look through this lens, and if you're able to do something, this time would be really short. It would be a very short lens you would be looking at. Just don't focus on what is happening in these 2-3 months. Just look what you can achieve in the next 7, 8, 5, 10 years. And that would help you set the tone and direction of what we want to do at RIS. So that really helped us. And we eventually took off. And it was never a smooth journey. It was very rough. The first 6 months weren't good. We thought we find very good wins. People know us. People now are talking about the 3 boys who are rescuing food. But eventually when we went out in the market, nobody was willing to give us excess food. It was such a taboo to talk about it. People used to were afraid of the food authorities. They were not telling us that if we even have excess food at in the first place. So all the restaurants we went into, we never got a deal with them. It was always that we do not have any food. We can't give you any food. Some of them were selling. Some of it was going into another market of reselling going into lower market. So we discovered a lot of things, but we were unable to crack a big win. So we had to change a lot of things. We have to change a lot of perspective. But by those 6 months, we realized one thing that we have to do. The more we were able to see things in a very close manner, the people we used to give food to, the communities, we actually got very closely exposed to the urban slums, the urban poverty, the reasons, the direct and indirect causes of hunger. We were exposed to what is happening around the urban periphery in urban cities. What is the hunger looking like? What is the direct and indirect reasons behind hunger? So it was very much of an eye opener for 6 months. It was still, I would say, the training that was going on before we actually could do something. So yes, it was a very uncertain time, and it had its own challenges.
So you mentioned talking to mentors gave you a new perspective or helped you understand how big of a problem this is. So as you mentioned, in your house, and your mom would have dastarkhan and stuff. So you were already you already knew that there were people who needed to be fed. How did you go about figuring out, okay, if there is food waste, for example, you mentioned a dawat and someone calling you and saying, could we have some food? How did you figure out okay, if this one person is having this problem or has food waste, there are so many other people who might also be in the same situation?
So we also went up to studying what is happening around the globe in this particular sector. How are people developing solutions? So maybe the non-profit is not the only solution. We came up with the whole new idea of that people are coming up with social enterprise model of things, right? So they while doing good stuff, they are then making revenues, they are generating revenues, and they are doing things in a slightly different way, which is not entirely donor dependent. So we had this structure in mind that someday we will also be that the North Star would be that we have to develop a social enterprise, a social business sort of a thing that is sustainable. So that was one thing that really struck us before we even started, that because the non-profit sector back in Pakistan still had a lot of taboo. People had some skepticism around this idea that where is the money going? What is the transparency looking like? We were young and we were really afraid. So somebody could just walk up and point so many things at your organization and you were just down the other day, right? So it was like a very common thing and can come up being the situation in the country. We always thought it's very risky to be in this business, and we always thought that if we have to do something, we have to do really which is transparent, which is meaningful, which is yet new and innovative as well. Because and then that is when the idea of social enterprise also came in since existence. And the challenges were we had to figure out a lot of challenges. So we had to figure out the legal side. So how do we incorporate all three of us? Because we never thought that our idea would be very investment friendly. We would be getting a lot of funding through that route. So how do we cater in as a legal structure that we could be ourselves in the structure as well, and then we could run the show as well. So we had challenges around developing the technology for food wastage when there was nobody talking about food wastage in Pakistan. It was still a new thing. People were talking about in the West, they had food banks, but there was no food bank in Pakistan. Nobody knew what a food bank looked like before we introduced it in Pakistan. So we had to take a lot of no's. We had to take a lot of rejection before we could actually make a win in that situation. We had to navigate ways to fundraise, because conventionally charities in Pakistan have been fundraised by people who were known, right? So if you look up to people who are running charities, are people who have been doing business for good 20, 30 years and they had a good social sector, the good social network that they could leverage. People who were sportsmen and they went into the charity thing. People knew them. They had glamour. They had all those things that could attract money, right? But here is this challenge that we are 3 students and people really don't know us. And we are talking about very big numbers, that we are facing a problem of 50% of the population is food insecure. That is around 100 million of the population. And there are so many children who are stunted, who are malnutrition. And this is the sort of scenario that we are building up, and which requires a lot of money and infrastructure to be pulled in. But we really don't know how to fundraise, and we need to figure out who are the channels, how this money in this sector particularly gets in through. And we have to figure out a business model around the whole idea. What is the way that we will absorb the money? What will be the business model? How will the transparency work about? So just imagine these are 3 kids who have no experience in doing jobs. We've just done small internships on our own. And then we are like finding the right advisors. We are finding the right mentors to help us take us through that route, taking government permissions to work in certain areas, working out the government relations, working out the fundraising, working out developing that model, doing operations, doing the business and BD. So it was all a very challenging task, all the what an entrepreneur has to do. But it was slightly different as well because the sector was really different. The numbers we were talking about were really different. The money, how it had to come and how it had to spend was really different. The licenses and certifications and the audit requirements that the sector we were in were really different. So it took us a lot of time to really understand the legal structures. And so this was a bit challenging. And now I look back, so if I had to advise somebody, I would advise them a lot of things to do differently so that they do not have to waste a lot of time figuring out what we had to figure out back then. And coming to the second part of your question, figuring out food wastage, it was just an idea at the start. So it was you can say that I had this thing that I saw, maybe I just had this idea in my mind that food wastage, because I'm a bit into food. I love cooking. I was the food guy among the of us. I had this idea that food wastage is one thing that is happening around. Maybe the weddings you go into, there's this culture that you always end up talking about food wastage when you go to a wedding, when you go to a buffet. And the food scene was taking on in Pakistan. So more and more restaurants are coming in, more and more different types of cuisines coming in. And food eventually becomes the biggest entertainment right now in Pakistan, right? So you know that food is coming in the processed food industry is growing. So if you talk about 2014-15, there are now more processed food. The how you see in the UK or maybe in the US, there's a lot of processed food industry you can find in the grocery stores. Now that the whole culture is in Pakistan, right? You see a lot of brands, but that was taking off. The food industry is taking off. So we realize that food wastage is going to be sanctioning. We're talking about it. It's going to be a major problem. And we always, as I said, we were also looking up to the global models that were happening around in the UK, in the US, because those economies were ahead of us, right? Even India, we followed a few examples, a few people who were developing sea solutions in India, right? So we knew these economies were ahead of Pakistan, and the problems they are solving right now will be the problems that we would be facing in like 5-10 years, because our economies are naturally going towards more consumerism, people, more grocery stores coming in, more restaurant chains coming in. So it is bound to happen, right? So we thought this problem will need to be addressed. And that is how we figured out that we need to delve into this and we need to develop a technology for it. We need to find a solution for it. And while we were working on food wastage, we were exposed to the idea of hunger that I said, the poverty that exists. And then we started developing more and more programs and went deeper into what the organization should look like in the future.
Can you talk a little bit about, because I was reading on the website, like there was something called the mega kitchens, and so you have different kind of programs, right? So what are one of, if you could talk about one of the programs that you have focused on and have seen some sort of success?
Well, we are addressing food security, as I said, I would just like to reiterate. So we at RIS believe that we just don't need to feed people, and there's not one singular dimension that we would be working in. We need to solve this problem as an infrastructural problem and as a behavioral issue as well. I'll explain that later. But developing that infrastructure needs a wholesome approach, right? So we developed different programs that address different problems of the supply chain. We have a food and nutrition division, which has a mega kitchen to it. The idea of mega kitchen is that we for the very first time in Pakistan, we are opening up food carts. These are food carts, you can call them food outlets, which we have developed through our R&D. We have developed a certain type of meal, which kind of can be liked and eaten by the masses. And we are trying to sell it at a very cheap cost. So it's different from Dastarkhan. So the idea is people who have respect and dignity, people even who are earning, but they do not have the means, they do not find it comfortable sitting around in soup kitchens and food places to stand in the queues for free food, because the inflation to your income gap is too high, right? So you're earning so less and the inflation is too high, and you are not able to put good food on your table. So this venture particularly aims to sell food at a break-even price eventually. Not right now, we are subsidizing it right now, but the idea is that it doesn't rely on donation funding. It doesn't have to rely on it. It's a sustainable venture at the end of the day. So it will be one kind of a thing in Pakistan that we're developing more and more branches of a food venture that doesn't necessarily have the objective of making money, but to feed the masses at a very affordable rate. We are selling them at 60 rupees per meal right now, and we are located at different hotspots where we find labor communities, where we find workers, where we find patients, students. So then the food is accessible and affordable, which is the main problem of food security. The food is not available and affordable and accessible to the masses. So through this venture, we are trying to make food accessible across Pakistan, which is attached to our central kitchen. And central kitchen has the capacity to produce food in bulk, and it's just like a micro franchise model that food is then developed into our central kitchen, and then through a hub and spoke model, our logistics vehicle take the food to the branches, and we have those people in the branches who are running the retail outlets, and it's all centrally packaged, procured, and delivered to those people, and those outlets are running. So this is how this program works. And then we have under the food and nutrition program, we have free food as well, but that is given in more confined community places like orphanages, schools, people who require food, not in more in public places. Public places, we have this as a program. Then we have our agri division as well, agri and livestock, where we work with smallholding farmers. So eventually we realize that we have to work on food security. We have to take care of the farmers in Pakistan, right? So we being an agri-based economy, it is very important for us to take where the supply chain starts from. So it starts from the small farmer, which happens to be the bulk of our economy, right? The bulk of our food is coming from the small farmer, and nobody is essentially working on them to help them build their yield, build their farms, build their capacities, train their generation that is coming to more progressive techniques, so that they could eventually become more and more sustainable. They could earn more through their farms, and the farming for them is rewarding, right? So it is very important so we have a model where we work to build their capacities, provide them inputs, connect them to the supply chains, and help them make money and increase their yield, so that they're more happy in their farms and the productivity increases. And then we connect them to the supply chains, and we are developing a whole lot of things around that area. So that is our, which is called the Kisaan Dost program. So this is the first under the food and nutrition program is called RISana. RISana is where we are selling the cheap and healthy meals, nutritional meals to the masses at a very low price. That is under the food and nutrition division. The other division is agri and livestock, where we have this Kisaan Dost program that I just mentioned, that is working with the smallholding farmers around Pakistan, especially in the south and rural Sindh, because those are the most rural areas which we need a lot of development. And we have this again livestock program under the same division that is working to provide livestock which we can rotate with the small farmers, and then we can buy back and give them more, so they can actually develop a herd of their own, and we can connect them to people who can buy them. So we have these kinds of programs, developing more agri service centers for Kisan, for the farmers, developing those institutes where they can come. It's developing like a one-stop shop eventually for the farmers. This is what our Kisan, our agri division looks like. We are doing a lot of research and advancement in developing new techniques, technology, working on regenerative agriculture as well. So developing climate smart agricultural practices, because Pakistan is very vulnerable to climate right now, and the food sowing and harvesting patterns are rapidly changing around in Pakistan, and the farmers doesn't know that if it is even viable to grow that particular crop in that area right now or not. It is vulnerable to floods, it is vulnerable to weather conditions, several diseases that are now coming in before time that are not expected. So Pakistan is a few regions are extremely vulnerable. So we are also working on developing climate smart practices, educating our farmers what regions are now suitable for which crop. So this is what our agri division is now looking into. Then we have this division of, we call it the RIS Youth Republic, Advocacy and Volunteerism. And then we have this program which is called RIS Youth Republic. So this is an extensively planned our youth division that is working on developing curriculums, training with the youth. We have a lot of universities and schools on board where we teach them a lot of things workshops, trainings, and we have some active chapters who are working on the entire mission that we believe in. That the single bottom line that we want to work to ensure human dignity and honor so that the human can reach their true potential, right? So that is what eventually RIS strives for. We want to make sure that every human is served with human respect and dignity, which is lost through the entire process of not having food, not having to eat food, which will eventually help them to reach their true potential. And that is what the RISK youth movement is all about. And then we have some amazing programs which are ventures in their own selves. We have this RIS Caravan, that is an agri-education tourism venture that focuses on bringing students and families closer to farms and teaching them about the practices that are happening around in Pakistan, the different type of crops that are happening in Pakistan, fruits and orchard cycles, give them exposure to the plucking, having to harvest them, and giving them farm trainings, connecting them with the youth of farm, with the farmers' lives and families. What is the ecosystem? Because Pakistan is largely farmers. So we are connecting through this agri-tourism. We are connecting a lot of school children and families with the farmers. So this is what RIS Youth Republic is doing. It has an own university chapters, which essentially it has its chapters in school kids as well, in very primary sections as well, where we in the very start try to develop and inculcate the right value system and right things that need the problem, the landscape of Pakistan, and why at a very young age, how we need to be more empathetic towards the problems that we have, how we need to look at from a very compassionate lens when it comes to solving these problems. So we try to inculcate through our workshops, through our training to this extent. So these are some of our major programs, and then we have this last community support program there where we are working on the RISK Bachao thing. And the RISK Bachao program is where you are saving food, right? So we just like right now we finished one project with one of the grocery companies where we distributed an excess leftover wheat flour that was left over from a store. So we pick bulk quantities of excess food. So that is a RISK Bachao program from supply chain, wherever the food is being wasted. We have an extensive network of NGOs that gets distributed right away. So the food is perishable and it's consumed right away. It doesn't get wasted. We have this emergency relief division that is working on calamities, specifically inside of Pakistan. But also when we have some capacities, we work around the globe as well. That is where our Gaza campaign is working right now. The campaign for Palestine is working, where we are sending aid to our partners. And this is the active relief emergency campaign that is working right now. And then we have this Ramadan and Qurbani. So Ramzan is all about feeding people through Ramzan Dastarkhan, and Qurbani is all about when we take we do this sacrifice, we do this Qurbani ritual, and the meat eventually gets distributed in our communities and the people who can't afford to Qurbani.
I was not aware that you are doing so many things. So it's really, it's amazing that you are able to do all these things. And I think you have been around for 8 years. So this is a lot that you're doing within the 8 years that you've been around. Can you talk a little bit more about what you are doing right now when it comes to Gaza and Palestine?
All of us know what the calamity and the emergency situation looks like in Palestine right now. So we have an relief division and emergency response division that actively try to work on emergencies in the limited capacity that we are able to. We are not obviously able to work according to the capacity and the extent of the problem is, but we are really active in those fronts. And right now the situation is that we are trying to our best to send aid to Pakistan. And there are only 2 organizations very actively working around in Pakistan, Al-Khidmat being one of them. And we are also, Al-Khidmat has a very good infrastructure as well. And they're doing fantastic, some amazing work in this domain as well. And we are essentially have partnered up with another on-ground NGO, a partner that is working on ground because we have some restrictions and we are unable to, obviously, we cannot go down, our teams cannot go down, but we have identified good partners who are working in Gaza, and we are sending our aid through them and having the food being purchased either from Egypt or inside Gaza, and then it is distributed in the communities that are now migrating, or that they are moving into different places or hospitals where the food is being needed. So we are particularly working around developing food baskets and getting it to the people in Gaza through our partners. And the second thing we are developing to do is send aid through the the Disaster Management Authority in Pakistan, which is set to send the third consignment, which is going to be sent, the physical aid that is going to fly to Egypt and then across through the Rafah to Gaza. So we are in touch with them and collecting the items which can be sent through air cargo to Egypt and then to Gaza. So these are the two fronts through which, the mediums through which we are trying to send aid to Gaza, right?
Having you talk about so many different programs that you're working on, and what you have achieved so far in like short, I would say like 8 years is a really long time, especially when you're working like at a nonprofit. So what would you tell me if I asked you, like, how do you measure your impact? Like, what impact have you had so far? Like, do you have any numbers that you can share?
Impact when it comes Zahir through our program. So when we are running programs, so every program which is run has its own parameters of what we want to achieve through that program. So if I particularly talk about food wastage, the division that we started off with, we've saved more than 1 million kgs of food in the supply chain, right? So that is worth millions of food that has been saved in Pakistan. We work with grocery chains, we work with restaurants, we work with farmers, we work with wholesalers, and we have developed a supply chain that we are able to feed so many people. So if I take out an average, so around 3.3 million people have been just fed by the food that we have saved. So the 3.3 million meals can be taken out from 1 million kgs of food that has been saved in the supply chain. So this is what is happening in food wastage right now. So we have fed more than through another program, CSA. So if we talk about our agri division, we have around 2,500, more than 2,000 hectares of acres of land that we are working with the small farmers right now, building their capacities and improving their yields. So up till now, we through our reports, we've internally analyzed that we've increased more than 40%, around 30 to 40% of the yield of the small farmers that we work with. And these are the small farmers which are below 5 acres, which have the land holding below 5 acres of land. So this is when we talk about our Kisaan Dost program. So when we especially talk about floods, we were able to distribute around 30,000 rations just across Pakistan in the time of when the floods were happening. We've made more than 150 houses in the flood affected regions, in the flood affected areas when we were working for flood relief. We had this 32,000 rations distributed through our teams in Sindh. We were living in Sindh. We have more than 150,000 meals, hot meals that we were preparing with the help of some local and international NGOs that were working. We developed our kitchens in floods, and more than 1,000 hot meals were given out to different capacities in different locations. 22,000 rations were handed out. 150 homes were developed. Tents, multiple tent cities were developed. Medicine camps were conducted throughout the entire span of floods that was particularly for flood affected areas. So in large, if we talk about different programs that we've run, we've fed more than 2-3 million people just alone through different feeding programs up till now. Meals I'm talking about. Every program has its own way of how we made the impact for that particular program. And if we talk about RISana, we're making food for accessible for up to 1,000 people every day in the communities that we've started giving out. So this is what it looks like. We are developing the RISana, the venture. We are opening up multiple branches now, up to 15 branches we are planning this fiscal year to open, and that will be providing cheap and hot meals to those localities. Through Ramadan, we feed around a million, close to 1 million meals in every Ramadan campaign that we do through our ration and Nastahan programs. So every program has a lot of impact in its own terms. We worked out in our relief campaigns, worked out in COVID as well, where we were also given a lot of awards. We were given the Commonwealth Award by the Queen as well. We were the recipient along with the Kuwait. So this was all being done in different projects. Every project has its own impact, which can be made through maybe meals, maybe the food we have saved, maybe the small farmers that we've worked around with, the flood aid or maybe the aid and relief that we've provided to different communities. So this is how we made an impact.
What advice do you have for like social entrepreneurs? Because there are not that many people like you doing the work that really needs to get done, because there is I wouldn't say that it's not possible to make it sustainable, but it's quite difficult to get to a point where you start breaking even, and you are less dependent on donors and stuff like the things that you just mentioned. What advice would you give to a social entrepreneur?
Well, even we are not at that particular point in time that we essentially do not require the donors. We currently, for different programs, we need a lot of support from our donors and the companies and the partners that we work with. But whatever model you make, so it necessarily doesn't have to be something that you being in the social sector, you end up making a charity or something. It can be anything. So whatever the person wants to make, he wants to work on climate, he wants to work on food, he wants to work on energy, whatever the problem that you want to solve. So a social enterprise, the legal structure doesn't really matter, whatever you have in mind. So you want to make a charity, you want to make a company, you want to make a partnership. But if you have something that you socially, the problem that you want to solve, for people, particularly in Pakistan, there are a lot of challenges. I've always said that there are so many challenges when a country is in chaos. It also means that we have a lot of opportunities to strike, especially the problematic areas. So we have energy as a problem, we have clean water as a problem, we have climate and air pollution as a problem. So every problem also has a very unique solution which is happening somewhere around the globe. The best part is to replicate that solution according to the local conditions, adapt that model to the local conditions of Pakistan. My single advice to all those people is start developing. There's a lot of potential to grow. Start developing solutions around a particular problem that Pakistan is facing, and you will end up creating a very good value addition, very good business model, very good revenue generation around that idea. But that needs to develop around that particular problem that you inherently want to solve when you see it as a challenge. And then you will find amazing opportunities around that area.
Thank you so much for taking out the time and telling me about RISQ, telling my audience about RISQ. I mean, it's not something that they get to hear all the time. So social impact startup is always something that is very unique and not that many people are doing it. I mean, I wish you all the best. What you're doing is very noble, and I wish you nothing but all the best and all the success one can have doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Zahir.
Thanks for listening to the Misaal podcast. I hope you enjoyed the podcast and will thank me by writing a review or sharing it on social media. Make sure you follow and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Thanks again. See you soon.